course, it's only my opinion, but from 18 to 28 years old, when we start thinking about life a bit more, where we ought to go and what we ought to do, there is one thing that's the biggest time waster for all of us, which is not social media scrolling as many people think. Of course, that is, if you got 12 plus screen time hours, then yes, for you most likely. But about a normal person, right? The biggest time wasted that we all have is arguing about life philosophy. And by the way, the reason it's a big time wasted for 18 to 28 year olds is because in this phase you are not yet forming a family, right? So a lot of life philosophies are important or crucial, in fact, for the home, for the household. But if we're talking friendships, business relationships, you're there for interactions, so you're there to have a good time, not necessarily to ponder life's choices or anything of the sort. So for this age bracket is what is most of a time waste. After that, if you encountered your loved one and that you want to actually chase it into a marriage, family, etc., you should have a few conversations about what things you value. Whether they want 5 children, whereas you want 1, they believe that it would be right to educate your children, or I don't know, sex identity, and you don't. Things of the sort, right? But until then, no, you should not waste a single second of your precious time into giving into all of this type of debate. And I really believe no one is talking about this enough. I saw somebody say this maybe 5-6 years ago, and I didn't think much of it. I was still a teenager then, and it was a video about biggest time wasters on your 20s. And I watched it actually to get ahead, right? Because I had a few plans going on, etc. And I thought, if I watch this now, then as a teenager I can not waste time of the things that people that are like 20 plus are doing, which I was already doing. I was already working pretty much full time. I was already independent, blah blah blah. I didn't think much of it, though I committed the sin to speak. What this means really is arguing about how we should live, arguing about what's right and what's wrong. The thing about this is, it's interesting, because our brain, they operate as very egocentric forces. They operate as very egotistical forces. What this means is we pretend, or we think to ourselves, that we are the main characters, and because of this, our opinion matters. You see it online, you see it everywhere. People want to say what's in their head. People want to just speak and give a statement that may even hurt somebody else without giving it a second thought, all for the sake of their own relief, which is incredibly selfish, but that's the way that the world is at right now. If you're a stronger person, then you can prevent this in yourself and have more discipline and say, I seek the relief not in exerting my frustration upon the world, but rather looking within and then appeasing myself. Anyway, let's talk about a few scenarios where you may have probably done this, where you have spoken about difference in values. Let's say you have siblings. You've probably spoken about what they did versus what you did, and argued about, so let's say you have a relationship, or there's a group of friends that you're hanging out with, and you're talking about romance, and then somebody says sleeping around is good, somebody says no it's not, because you shouldn't experiment, you shouldn't find yourself, you should do all of that with the same partner. And then you have a back and forth, and then you argue about which philosophy is better. It is as simple as whichever philosophy is better for you, you should then exert. If you believe a certain way of life is good, do not hope that others just agree to that vision, but rather make it come true. Let's say, for example, that you discovered this great book and it's changed your mind, it's changed how you think about things. And you said to yourself, man, this would be so beneficial if other people went to go do it, right, to read it. And then you present it to your friends and whatever, and they're like, I'm just not really interested. But what if instead, all of these things which this book kind of changed your mind about, maybe it told you how to make money, how to start a business, and you went and took action and you started making moves, and your friends saw you and said, hey man, how are you like doing all of this, whatever. Then when they have come to you and when you have something to show for, you say, I'm happy you asked, it's because of blah 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 blah. And then you start sharing your opinions and your values and the things that you've acquired along the way. But if you just argue about life philosophy what will you achieve when most of the time it will end in an argument, right? Somebody will say left, somebody will say right. And when this happens, when an argument happens, both parties end up leaving more determined than ever than they were right, than they did at the start. And they wouldn't have learned anything new. Do not underestimate what I mean when I say debating life philosophy. It doesn't have to be something as abstract or deep as talking about what the meaning of life is, because how often do you do that? But rather, everyday actions. Essentially, any argument ever is about life philosophy differences. So think about arguments you've had. How long do they last? Anywhere from 1 minute to like 3 hours. I'm sure we've all had a conversation that's lasted way too long, where we ended and we were like, bro, it's nighttime or whatever, and I've achieved nothing today. I spoke to this person, they didn't change, I didn't change. What was this for? And even if we did change, against our will or with our will, and then we learned something new, something that helped us, how has it helped us? Because so far it's made us waste 3 hours of our time. If I was to say it in a way that lacked depth, the biggest time waster is arguing. But that would be less accurate, because you may argue for something, right, that you're trying to accomplish. You may argue because somebody's laying you down, and this is just a way of releasing your emotions in an untrained manner, right? You argue and you quarrel. And as of recently, I've been keeping this in mind, and I've already saved myself like a good few hours at the very least, about 10. So recently, your loved ones above all are probably the people you will argue with the most, because they will be the ones that want you to come to their way of thinking, because obviously whichever way of thinking that you have, you believe it to be better than anyone else, otherwise why would you think that way? So they will call upon you to join them, and you will argue. And because it's loved ones, you don't just run away and you don't just say as if it was a stranger, yo, like, leave me alone, dog. So something that I have been doing in order to kind of combat this is realize to myself that it's unnecessary. It's our ego playing in. We don't need to engage in these conversations. We don't need to prove anything to the other person. A loved one in my family has been doing that to me, right? Questioning my actions, my motives, not having knowledge of the things that I have knowledge of. And likewise, neither do I have knowledge of the things that he has knowledge of. But the point is that, he called it upon me and he felt compelled to tell me things. And, it's always appreciated, and you should always appreciate people willing to go so far for you as to give you advice, as to tell you what you ought to do, because it's a sign that they look out for you. You should always thank them. It doesn't mean that you should always just adhere to it. What I've been doing has been as simple as acknowledging or ignoring, even if it's loved ones. Because you need to remember, at the end of the day, if you're both going to end up the conversation in the same position that you started it with, what if you didn't start it at all? Are they going to be angry at the fact that you gave them minimal responses and were kind of indifferent? Okay, so what? If you engaged in a discourse for 2 hours, they would have gone off angry at the fact that you guys spoke for a few hours, and the tension was high the whole time, so they're gonna have a bad image for you, or be angry with you for the next few days perhaps. What if instead you just ignored it? Acknowledge them, be like, no. And then if they follow you up, like saying things for example, why are you not saying anything? Why are you barely responding? As if you were an uninterested girl giving one-word answers or replies. Well, you just say to them, I respect your opinion, man, but I don't want to talk about this with you. And then they carry on asking, you just say, man, I'm not going to talk about it. And they carry on asking, I'm not going to talk about it. And then what are they going to do? Or what are they going to say at that point? Are they going to force it out of you? Fine, in that case, get in a death battle. No, that's not going to happen. Anyway, I would encourage you to look out for this, to look out for arguments, look out for essentially analyzing whether you are trying to share something valuable or for what intentions you're trying to do it. Because I have observed that mostly it is because of our own ego and our own desire to say, I want people to hear my opinion. What I have to say is important, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, try to be 1% better every day. Join the Discord. Much love. Quick reminder to fix your posture and take deep breaths into your diaphragm from your nose.